I made a terrible mistake and lost the one man I've ever loved because of my self-centered ideals. I'm horrified at the prospect of giving him anguish. But what's even more heartbreaking is the realization that he's gone forever. I had thought that we might fix my faults together. I had a loving boyfriend and friend, but opted to give it all up for meaningless flings with random males. I was 20 when I met Henry, my future husband, in the library. He gave me a book from the top shelf. We started up a discussion and swapped numbers. Henry lacked physical attractiveness, yet had an intriguing charm. Our friendship rapidly progressed into a romance. To me, he was the first of everything. First date, first kiss, first love, and first intimate experience. For him, I wasn't the first. He was considerably more experienced than I, making me feel inferior. When he proposed, I felt a combination of happiness and dread that I had selected the wrong life partner. After all, I didn't have somebody to compare Henry to. That's when I proposed an open relationship to acquire experience before our wedding, and persuade myself that he was the one. Henry was furious. He said that he did not want to share me and regarded me as his future bride. His remarks impacted me so deeply that I temporarily abandoned the concept of having an open relationship and decided to marry him. Our wedding was intimate yet lovely, attended by family and friends. Our first year of marriage was joyful, then the nagging worries returned. I was concerned that marriage had taken away my opportunities for thrilling intimate experiences. My buddies could openly discuss stories about their numerous flings, whereas I had nothing to say. So I decided to bring up the matter with Henry. I hesitantly hinted at an open relationship at first, but his answer revealed that if I went any further, I would risk losing him. I inquired how he felt about adding some spice to our bedroom life. His frank, unapologetic reaction infuriated me. He'd go immediately away. I thought he was putting unfair boundaries because he had dated other women before me. Why can't I do the same? A few months later, I brought it up again, and received the same severe response. Admittedly, it was selfish of me to marry him, while still having feelings for other guys. My mind wandered as I stupidly hoped to preserve Henry's love. Now I loathe myself for betraying the most important person in my life, succumbing to temptation. There is always a spark that drives our basic instincts. My name was Mark. He was a monster of a man, built like a bodybuilder, and his tight clothing highlighted his bulging muscles. He grabbed women's attention effortlessly, like a swaggering alpha man exuding confidence. Mark was reassigned to my department, becoming my direct supervisor. That means having daily briefings alone together. He was approximately 30 years older than myself and my spouse. He had a flirtatious approach and spoke gently, as if he were continually enticing me. It was impossible to be professional with him without feeling excited. One evening, Mark invited me out for drinks after work. I could not believe my ears. Was he interested or just polite? My mind raced, but I couldn't reject him. We went to a tavern near the office, and I drank too much. Our conversation shifted from professional to personal banter. I expressed my wish to be more than simply one man's wife. I discussed everything, from the concept of an open marriage, which allows for intimate freedom without guilt, to my desire to him. He inquired whether I had addressed this with my spouse. I responded sure, but he disagreed and threatened to leave if I went forward with it. Mark then encouraged me not to seek permission, and instead present it to my spouse as a done thing. He advised that I open up my marriage, so that I may pursue this without Henry's agreement. Mark was the epitome of bad decisions, the sort to offer terrible advice while saying it was for the woman's benefit. Now I understand he only wanted to sleep with me. But in the time, I was looking for any reason for my desires. That night, Mark brought me to a hotel, and treated me like the queen of the universe. I knew Henry made me feel that way every day, but when it came from another guy, I felt like a joyful adolescent again. When I returned home, my husband was already asleep on the couch, as if he had been waiting for me to come from work. I silently slipped into the bathroom to wash away the scent of booze and foreign intestine. Then I glanced up at Henry and said I had something to talk about. He responded that he had vital and extremely joyful news to give, which gave me the opportunity to speak first. A happy smile appeared on his face as he listened carefully, only to fade away in seconds. But I didn't care since I knew I was doing the right thing. I just stated that I wanted to spend time with other men and would appreciate his encouragement. I desired other guys adoring and worshipping me in the same way Henry did with other women. Otherwise, I could not be satisfied with him. What crap, I spat at the only person who ever loved me. Those words continued to resonate in my head, causing tears to fill up whenever I recollect that moment. How foolish I was. He gazed at me for a long time before bowing his head down in defeat. After what seemed like an hour of stillness, he said, "Well, if that's how you feel, then fine by me." He stood up and went away without ever expressing his joyous news. The next day, I sprang joyfully into my boss's hug. We had intimacy on his desk, and this was only the beginning. Mark was my first lover following Henry, but far from my last. I began going out on Fridays with coworkers to their favorite bar, and occasionally woke up on Saturdays in the arms of a random stranger who I never saw again. I'd become a wanton prostitute, and I thought my loving Henry had accepted this. I proceeded to sleep with various men practically daily. But after 2 months, the truth hit me in the face. One Friday, while I prepared for work, Mark dropped over to pick me up, because I believed my husband had already departed as usual. I thought we may have some intimacy before leaving to work, but Henry was still at home. My husband answered the door to see Mark standing there, flowers in hand. I couldn't hear their discussion above the shower sounds. When I walked out, they were conversing cheerfully as if everything was normal. Henry never showed any emotion, including rage, hurt, disappointment, or despair. Simply grins or frowns. So I honestly thought he was perfectly cool with our open marriage. My naive, immature mentality had no idea I was digging my own doom. On the way to work, Mark joked about how well my spouse had adapted to the concept of an open relationship. It was Friday. Mark and I reserved a room with a panoramic view of the dazzling Cape. We had intense intimacy that night. When I arrived home on Saturday, I could tell something was wrong right away. My spouse had an unusually peaceful demeanor, and I seldom worked weekends. He'd constantly have his favorite songs screaming over the speakers. I looked inside our home gym. He wasn't on the treadmill as he is every Saturday morning. I went to the kitchen, thinking that he would at least prepare coffee as usual. On the counter, I found my favorite mug. I grinned, glad to discover remnants of our shared existence. I took up the cup, anxious to take a sip, but it was empty. Inside was an envelope with a letter. I don't recall the exact words today, but I've kept them as a sad reminder of letting a great marriage to crumble for the sake of casual flings. I am very disappointed in myself. I've done a lot of terrible things, but losing Henry is my biggest regret. The message indicated that Henry had gone for a month-long business trip to Canada. Upon his return, he intended to petition for divorce. He regretted marrying me and squandering so much of our time together. Next to it was an airline ticket and passport in my name. A statement on the reverse of the ticket read, "Do you remember the news I mentioned 2 months ago? Here it is. My firm was offering to fund our accommodations in Canada. They also offered you a job." His wedding band sat at the bottom of the cup. My entire universe shattered in front of my eyes. I spent the rest of the day staring at that mug, unable to eat or drink and filled with sorrow. My life gradually deteriorated, resulting in a severe melancholy. The next day, as if on cue, Henry's best buddy arrived to carry away all of his belongings. I cried uncontrollably as he and other movers took practically everything that belonged to my spouse. Henry's buddy gave me a nasty look and labeled me a. His comments wounded then, but they sting much worse today, because my house has seemed dreary and lonely since my husband departed. I attempted to divert myself by moving from affair to affair, bed to bed, to dull the pain of losing my darling. Mark filed a transfer request less than a week after everything transpired. When I inquired why, stating that I believed we had something developing between us, he honestly stated that he was moving on now, that the fun had over. I felt very deceived, and my new employer developed an immediate dislike for me. I was so distraught about my personal life that my career deteriorated significantly. I was dismissed shortly after for making another mistake. My parents and friends disowned me. Henry's friend informed them all about my hedonistic habits, and they wanted nothing to do with a prostitute who abandoned her husband for another guy. I lost everyone I cared about in a very short period of time. A month later, Henry returned from his trip, and we began our divorce. I pleaded with him numerous times to listen and allow me to explain. I even proposed we go to marriage counseling. However, he refused to amuse me at all. By the time we officially ended our relationship, I had lost our warm house, my wonderful partner's support, and a single human who cared about me. I still despise myself for destroying everything. Thank you for listening to the story to the end, and if you like it, please support us with a like as well as subscribe to our channel. Write in the comments what you think about the story.